Welcome everyone to DEI Fundamentals. We're so happy to see some familiar names and faces joining us today. This is about the fundamentals of DEI and how little things can actually really make a difference. So this is the third in our DEI series. We did one back in March, one in April, and now this is our third one of our Real Talk series. So what we've tried to do is that we have tried to tackle the unspoken, unaddressed issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And with me, I just want to thank Tommy English and Cindy Medaglia for being with me on this journey. And thank you to those of you who have been through all of the programs with us, because we see some familiar names. So the fundamentals that we want to speak about today is really, we want to start with identifying what is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then get into some of those unspoken topics. Diversity is the differences we humans bring to the table. We all have distinctions, and that's one of the things that's so important to recognize is the distinctions that we have and what we bring. Equity is actually fair treatment and equal access for all the parties involved, for all the various types of human beings that we have out there. And we have examples where there is systemic inequity. I don't know if any of you have seen or read it about FEMA. This has just been out in the last week on how FEMA financial support during experiences of difficulty and natural disasters, they're finding that white neighborhoods are getting more support than non-white neighborhoods. And this is a systemic racism issue that is occurring. Now, we might not be, because we're not at FEMA, we might not be able to do anything about that, but we need to recognize that these things are occurring. The three of us talked about an article that we read about, I guess it was about a month ago, I think, Cindy, Tommy, where there was a family selling a home, and the evaluator came in to put a home value on the house, and the value that came back was not what they expected, and so they wanted another valuation, another process, and they suspected there might be some discrimination going on. So really good friends of theirs said, let's switch out the pictures of the families. And so they took out all of the pictures of the family, people of color, and put in the friend's family. They had the house reevaluated, and ironically enough, and sadly enough, their new valuation came back $250,000 more. This is something systemic. This is, and we don't even realize how insidious it is. So equity is so important. Diversity, remember, is about the differences between people and our various distinctions. Equity is about giving fair treatment and not having these forms of discrimination. And these things actually occur inside of organizations as well. And we may not be aware of it. We may not realize it. And then the third thing is inclusion and belonging of all of these diverse people, having the fair access, having an equal voice, having a seat at the table. So this program is for you if you want to explore those uncomfortable things and aspects of DEI and learn little things that you can do starting today to start to make a difference. So now, if you have questions, please go ahead and put that in the chat box. We will go ahead and try and answer that, or put it in, ask a question. We'd love to answer those questions. So what's important about understanding DEI is that at least if you take some of the recommendations that Cindy, Tommy, myself will give you today, or hopefully you will gain insights, what we do know is that when you have diversity, and you have diversity of people, you have diversity of perspective, you have diversity of experiences, you will, and studies show this over and over and over again, you will get better decision making, you will make better choices, your teams will make better choices, you will have better outcomes. And financially speaking, if you just go with bottom line inside of organizations, you're going to get a better return on investment. You're going to make more money. So DEI is not just a good social thing to do, it's fundamentally a good business decision to make. And so that's why we want to talk about these things. With DEI and what we're going to do today, there's just so much. I mean, the three of us talk about this all the time. And even though we're doing this webinar, we're barely going to scratch the surface on the importance of DEI. Why do it? Why focus on it? Why at this juncture, because this stuff is not new. 100 years ago, I can remember coming into work and it was called affirmative action back then. And being in the banking world, I could see the discrimination that was occurring in terms of loans, home ownership, things like that, because of distinctions that were discriminated against. So, in our DEI program that we do, our workshop, we delve deeply into 4 key areas that we're going to talk about today to help you and your company build a strong DEI culture. So and I want to share this with you. This is our version of what we like to call our DEI model. And our DEI model includes 4 key steps. First off is that if you want to build a strong culture of inclusion, equity, and diversity, you have to acknowledge, and you have to become aware, and you have to acknowledge where there are inequities. And you have to be authentically real and honest with what that is. And sometimes that's not always easy to do, to realize that maybe we've got something here. And maybe you didn't create it, maybe you inherited it, or maybe you were part of something and didn't even realize your contribution to it. That's why awareness and acknowledgement is so important. And then being authentically honest and brave. And Tommy's going to talk with us more about that. And then when you see something that is not right, the ability and the bravery it takes to be an ally, to have allyship, and to advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion. And Cindy's going to talk with us about that and why that's so important. And all of us are going to be giving you some key steps that you can take. Then you want to take action. It's one thing to acknowledge it. It's another thing to do something and do something different about it. So these are the 4 areas we are going to talk about today. Each one of us is going to share with you some of the insights and learnings that we've had and give you some tips. So I'm Susan Robertson. For the last 33 years, I have focused on nothing but leadership and culture. And whenever you go into leadership and culture and trying to do cultural transformation, that whatever you do starts with people. And it starts with people's behavior, and it starts with people's beliefs. So it starts with awareness first. All of us, including the 3 of us who do this for a living, we all have areas where we are unaware. We are unaware of how our actions and the impact of our actions have, and what the impact of our actions have on other people. So it's really important to have awareness and then acknowledge. Maybe we don't always like what we see, but acknowledge what exists. Something that we always say is perception is reality, because if people believe something to be true, they're going to act in that way. So as leaders, it's so important to understand that. The second thing with acknowledgement is understanding where your company is, or if you as a leader, how your team got to be the way that it is. And I want to share with you one more thing. I really liked this particular model when I saw it, is your ability to say, what have we created? Have we created an inclusive culture where everyone has equal voice? Have we created an exclusive culture where some people are in and some people are out? Do we have some integration and yet we still have some segregation going on internally, but yet they're still integrated? Or do we have true segregation going on inside of our organization? When we saw this, we thought that this was a really great way to explain how you need to look and how you would want to start. The first step of awareness and acknowledgement is to what your team or your culture looks like. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point. So acknowledgement is very simple. It is to understand and have awareness of what's been created, whether it's been done consciously or unconsciously. And then we have to take a look at where we have separation, where we have exclusion, where we are not creating inclusion and community. So that's what I've been working on for a long time. Whether it's been diversity related, affirmative action, or just, the simple way it's called inside of organizations is favoritism, silos, lack of teamwork. I mean, those are all forms of exclusion, segregation. And these things are, if you will, normal issues, but we don't often think of the diversity piece of that. And that's what we wanted. That's what's so important to talk about. A friend of mine, Gail, she said, if you really want to know if you have a true DEI culture, just look. Look who's there. Look who's at the table. And acknowledge what's been created. And so a former client of ours, I'll just call him Bob, was the CEO, and in his heart really wanted to take on creating more diversity. And he first started with looking around the table of his C-suite, and he saw nothing but what he would say is a sea of white, and white male. And he realized that he had some part, this is acknowledgement, this is awareness, that he had some part in creating that. He didn't understand what part, and he didn't think he did it on purpose, but he realized as a CEO, he had some part for what got created. So let me give you some numbers. And this is what I always say is look at the numbers, do the numbers. If you want to have awareness and acknowledgement in this organization of 7,000 people, the front line had 85% white female, front line sort of first level management, 8% people of color and other diversity, other levels of distinction, and 7% male. White male, well, I'll take that back. There was one non-white male at that level, but you could see the distinction was 85% white female, and a much lower number of people of distinction or people of color, and a low number of male. At the mid-manager level, the next level up, the numbers started to change drastically, where it became 60% female. Now remember, it starts at 85%. 60% female, 35% white male, and 5% people of color. So the numbers went down for women, people of color, and other distinctions, and the white male went up. Now, this is not white bashing at all. It's just acknowledging what's there. And if we want to have diversity, equity, inclusion, we have to say those things out loud, without bashing ourselves or anyone else. At the VP, the VP level, so you go up from mid-managers to VP, it then switched to 65% male, white male, sea of white, and 35% white female. And then by the time you got to the C-suite, as Bob said, we had nothing but white males. And so he wanted to authentically and in his heart, and again, Tommy's going to talk about that, change this, because he realized something was happening. Now, he didn't go around witch hunting inside of his organization. He said, let's figure out what's happening. We're acknowledging it. We have an awareness of that this is going on. So let's figure out what's happening, why it's happening, how it's happening. So then that way we can create actions, distinct actions to make sure that our employee group reflects the diverse population that we have in our community. So that's that, while acknowledgement and awareness in a way sounds easy, it's not easy, because sometimes it means admitting hard truths that don't often feel so good. And then doing that in a way that says, we're going to make a difference. So simple things that block our ability to create the kind of culture we want to create is we are unaware of our own bias. So we have unconscious bias and we don't even know it. And that's where we in our workshops, that's where we start. What kind of unconscious bias do we actually have? Again, without blaming. Favoritism. Take a look at how favoritism plays out. Cindy and I were working with a team, and they realized it was through the favoritism that certain people were giving access to bigger projects, and so therefore getting more training. So that created an exclusive culture, and that then created a diversity issue. We won't go into this, but microaggression, we say things and we don't even realize that we have just now created a they or a them. And when we do that, we dehumanize. other people. And then not noticing the distinction. We talked about that in a previous webinar, where when we say we don't see color, we're actually not noticing, we're saying we're not noticing distinction, but we do notice distinction between people. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people are smart, some people are funny. Those are all distinctions. And that means that that's that person, right? And what they bring. So here's what you can do. Here's 4 things that you can do to improve your acknowledgement and awareness of your DEI inside of your organization. First thing, acknowledge, do the numbers. It might be harsh, but do the numbers. Mm-hmm. Again, do it without blaming. And then second, start to invite. If you see people that aren't being included, create an outreach. It's simple enough. I was at a fundraiser not too long ago for a sport called lacrosse, and it's primarily Ivy League, and Ivy League is primarily white male. And there was one young man who was he was a player at one time in his life, but he was used to being in the sea of white, and he was standing there by himself. So I just went up and said hi. And then the next thing I knew, we were playing cornhole and talking, but no one else went up to him. It's so simple. You go up and you invite and you talk. We're all just human beings. Take a look at favoritism. Take a look at the core of favoritism. We often think of it's we say in sales, like, likes, like. We like people who like us, familiarity. So if we have that, recognize, and this is what this group that Cindy and I worked with, is that is discriminating against everyone who's not in their in-group, because they're not getting equal growth and equal development. So therefore, how are they going to have a seat at the table? So we have to become conscious and take that action of growth and development of others. And then speak up when you see it. And Cindy's going to talk about advocacy and allyship. How do you speak up? So with that, I want to turn it over to Tommy. And as I shared, Tommy, she has recently retired. If you've been through the other programs, she has recently retired into a new life for herself, and she has her own company called Authententional Coaching, and this is something that she's always had near and dear to her heart as a leader. She's held many roles over the years, but mostly she's worked a lot inside of call centers, and so she's had that opportunity to deal with multiple races, multiple people of distinction in major financial institutions, and so she's dealt with her whole life in nonprofits and in these call center roles, the need for affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion, and ensuring that the discrimination did not occur. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Tommy, to talk about how authenticity plays out with diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thanks, Sue. So authenticity, according to my friend Miriam, the dictionary, means to be true to one's own personality, spirit, or character. And I named my business Authententional Coaching because I want my interactions and my coachings to be about being authentic and being intentional while getting the desired results personally and professionally. I think author and storyteller Brene Brown states it best. To be authentic, we must cultivate the courage to be imperfect, vulnerable. We have to believe that we are fundamentally worthy of love and acceptance, just as we are. I've learned that there's no better way to invite more grace, gratitude, and joy into our lives than by mindfully practicing authenticity. And as human beings, we desire authenticity from others, but to really receive it, we have to live it and be authentic. And the journey to being a more authentic person and a more authentic leader, it does start with the little things, like we put when we were marketing and asking you to join this. It's just the little actions that you put into place. And I do want to share about 4 or 5 tips that as leaders, creating a diverse environment, these are 5 things that we can do and put into action. And you're probably already putting them into action, but my challenge to you today is to be more aware of the actions and more intentional, as I put in the name of my business, Authententional. So, as Sue talked about, you do want to be self aware. Number one, be self aware. And being self aware means revealing your true self. Authentic leaders don't hide who they really are. And as a woman, and as a Black woman, I had to learn to bring Tommy to the table. And this doesn't mean that I had to share all of my details, all of my background and past experiences with everybody, but it does mean that you have to be open and transparent about your challenges or things that you faced in the past. Authentic leaders ask questions such as, how can I share this challenge in a way that helps and uplifts others? You think through what you want to say ahead of time and you share purposely, but you're never afraid to share, even when communicating difficult news. So, being authentic is really about having courage. An example of that is in my career of 30 years, I've had to do a lot of layoffs. And I cannot think of one that went horribly because I took the time to be self aware, to be true to myself, and to think about the message and how I was communicating that message and how I was going to bring the people in on that. And I still have people that call me today who got a package, wasn't expecting it, but still contact me to say they appreciate how it was handled and keep me up to date on how they're doing in their new life. The second tip I would give is to always get feedback. And this is something you're going to hear from me frequently. I've always stated, and Sue has stated, feedback is and can be a gift. And sometimes it can be like a pinch that hurt because sometimes it can knock your ego down a notch or two because you may hear some things that you were not expecting to hear. But the truth is that feedback will help us take our authentic leadership to the next level. And instead of blaming others or complaining about the situation, authentic leaders treat each experience as a learning experience. So, again, authentic leaders ask good questions. How can I do better the next time? They take to heart every piece of constructive criticism, but they use their intuition and their self awareness to apply what feedback makes the most sense. I had an example of leaders where they thought I didn't respect work-life balance because, and I'm sure some of you out there do the same thing. You clean out your email on the weekend, you get caught up. And I sent out tons of emails on the weekend, and I got feedback from my leaders that you don't respect work-life balance and you expect us to work 7 days a week. That wasn't the reality, but my actions might have seemed that way. So I had to change what I did. If that meant me doing my emails on Sunday for me and saving it to send it out during the week to my leaders, or calling them and letting them know I will call you if there's something urgent that you need to respond to. Otherwise, I'm just sending out emails and I don't expect you to respond over the weekend. So just being aware and being your true self is very important as it pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and being authentic. The third one is release the need to be liked by everyone. And this is something that I really had to work on, particularly again, when you're a minority, when you're a woman, when you think about the numbers that Sue just quoted, you think, hey, I got to do something different to be, a part of that number or be a part of that group. And most leaders struggle with their need to express their own identity and to fit in. There's this video out there where, and I forget the lady's name, where she talks about bringing your whole self and your authentic self to work when really, they really don't want you to. But in our DEI workshop, we talk about why it is important that you bring your authentic self and how our differences makes us unique. And when you don't need to be liked or loved by everyone, it frees you up to be your true self. And it helps us to be innovative and diverse in our thinking. The fourth tip is just to find balance. Authentic leaders are confident yet humble. This is a challenge at times, but authentic leaders are always striving to find that balance point. You've got to know that you are worthy and that you are fully capable and that you believe in yourself. And yet you've got to be down to earth, practical, and focused on implementing behaviors that you can put into practice every day. So I always say, in finding that balance, strive to be better, to look at things through a different lens, and be intentional about making necessary shifts. And fifth, know your values. And this is what we really get into in our workshop, and embracing who you are, bringing your true self to the table and embracing others. Authentic leaders take the time to get to know themselves and their core values. And most know the value of doing this, but never take time to actually do it in reality. And sometimes this process includes journaling, which I do all the time, talking to others, engaging with the community at large, and not just those that you're comfortable with, which we get into in our DEI workshop. And this is something we really delve into, because knowing your values and appreciating others will create that inclusive and diverse environment. And when you're being authentic and taking those small actions, you can naturally evolve into being an advocate and ally. And we have Cindy, who has a tremendous leadership background, has dealt with race, equity, gender issues, and a multitude of people issues. So Cindy, talk to us about advocacy and allyship.
Thank you, Tommy. I appreciate that. So as Sue talked about acknowledgement and awareness. Tommy talked about authenticity. These are key building blocks to becoming an ally or to be able to advocate for others. You might be asking yourself, if you're not in on the buzzwords around the DEI initiative, and it's just really should be a way of life for us, right? Allyship is built on relationships. So whether you've been doing it already or you want to begin today, build relationships, be trustworthy, make sure that you're being consistent. And most importantly, be accountable when you made a mistake or you talked out of turn or you hurt someone's feelings and you didn't mean to. Be accountable, apologize, and just be self-aware moving forward. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at how I can be an advocate. The most obvious ones are, what folks are talking about is, white people being an ally to people of color, men being ally to women to support them, able-bodied individuals being able to be an ally to those that have different abilities, a straight woman being an ally to the LGBTQ community. All of these different things, those that are affluent or are financially stable and sound, being able to be an ally to those that are less fortunate or don't have a lot of money. But I have an example where when it just in the workplace, it's a matter of just being an ally or an advocate to someone who is being victimized in general. It didn't matter the color of their skin. It didn't matter, what their religious belief was. They were an individual as a frontline employee who was handling a customer call. And unfortunately, she was giving misinformation. There was a management employee that could hear over the cubicle what the conversation was and fully understanding that, oh, she's giving wrong information. Well, what the management employee did was they got up out of their seat, they came around to where the frontline employee was and just completely berated her very loudly. In fact, there were other customers with other frontline employees that overheard the demeaning tone and the words that this management employee used to this frontline employee, telling her she's giving the wrong information. I wasn't there to witness it, but someone came to me because this young lady was so upset when that situation was over. She was crying. And when I went to check her out, make sure she was okay. She wanted to quit on the spot because of that interaction. I immediately, after I made sure she was calm and that she was okay, and please don't quit your job, I'm sorry this happened, we're going to get it addressed. I went to seek out the management employee that had done this, who was a peer of mine. Fortunately or unfortunately, she wasn't at her desk when I went looking for her. Gave me a second to pause to say, well, she's my peer. She doesn't report to me. The appropriate thing to do is for me to let the boss know that this situation occurred and that I expected it to be addressed, because that was completely unacceptable. This action alone is the number one thing that each of us can do. And that is, when you see something or someone brings something to your attention, you have to say something in the moment. You don't wait until it's later. You got to do it in the heat of the moment. You got to have courage and bravery and be sure that you're addressing it right then and there. Of course, when I brought it to the boss's attention, this is a woman who's had a history of being a bully, but it was never addressed. I think people were just afraid to address it with her because she was just that powerful, right? The boss, non-confrontational, didn't really want to deal with it. And then once I explained that this circumstance could be perceived by the employee as a hostile work environment, and if he was unwilling to take action, then it was my responsibility to take it to human resources. All of a sudden things changed, and the manager actually did take it to human resources and had it addressed. So, that's one major tip, that if you're wanting to be an ally, you're wanting to be an advocate, stand in your strength and look out for the others and speak up for the others and do it in the moment. No matter how scary, I was shaking in my boots. I knew that whatever that wrath was that this woman had been demonstrating, I had never experienced it. But, something was going to happen as a result of this. And the good news is, it was addressed. She had to publicly apologize to the employee. And then she was put on notice that one more act like this, she was going to be out of a job. And she was a 32-year employee. So it was good to see that someone stepped up, and, it was a matter of just advocating on their behalf. So words that we speak, we can talk a good game as far as, oh, I'm an ally, I do this, I do that. You know what? At the end of the day, only those that you're trying to advocate, they're the ones that are going to tell you whether you really are doing it or not. Mm-hmm. You can't think that your actions, that you're checking all the boxes and you're doing all the right things. Only those that you are looking out for or that you're advocating for can be the ones to tell you whether you are, in fact, taking action appropriately, doing the right things. So here's 4 key things that you can do. And honestly, I'm going to barely touch on them. In our workshop, we take a really deep dive on this, but 4 things that you can do. Number 1, do your homework. Be aware, just like Sue had said, by understanding, really, do you have prejudices or unconscious bias? Be aware of that and really be cognizant of it. The second thing you can do is seek feedback. Just like, Tommy said, feedback is a gift. By acknowledging what people are saying to you, that's going to help you become even stronger as far as being an ally or advocating for others. The third thing that you can do is, be real, own your privilege. Really, that's about authenticity. Many of us, we have experienced privilege throughout our lifetime, but we've also experienced where we weren't. We were the marginalized individual. And what did that feel like? And, how did it feel when someone came to your aid? Just reinforce that. So owning your privilege is critically important. And then lastly, and it's a great segue into our 4th A, and that is take action. If you see something, say something in the moment. Be brave, have courage, but do it in the moment. And there are other actions that you can take, whether they be huge or whether they're just little baby steps in order for you to improve in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Sue, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and let's talk about action. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, so we hope you're walking away with some small things that you can do to help create inclusion and to help build community within your own organization, because it takes little steps in order to make a big change. And so first, acknowledge, as I like to say, do the numbers, see who's around you, even in your personal life, who's in your circle and who's not. Do you have a diverse circle? Because remember what I said before, likes like. We like what's familiar to us. And so sometimes in order to have equity and to have diversity, we have to stretch beyond our comfort zone. So stretch our comfort zones, open our eyes. Let's see what's actually really happening. All three of us go into different corporate cafeterias, and you can see segregation occurring inside of organizations. So there are things that you can do to bring groups together. Hey, why don't we all join this table and start to work toward integration instead of separation? Identify, use that chart that we showed you before. Identify where's your organization really and what can you do about that, and work toward building that community. All of these things, as Tommy said, takes bravery and courage, because we're stepping beyond, we're creating waves, we're creating change. And most of us, we don't like change. We don't mind initiating change on someone else, but most of us don't like change being initiated on us. So, and be willing to be imperfect and make mistakes, and be willing to admit that I've got some unconscious bias. I have some discriminatory thoughts. There's sometimes I've said they and those people. We're human. All right, so what do we do to correct it? Do our homework, acknowledge our unconscious bias, and then start stepping out of the patterns that we put ourselves into, particularly if you have a leadership role inside of your organization. Some other quick tips that I've heard, some of the best practices that I've seen in other organizations, is that when they are hiring for a position or looking to promote, is they take the names off. They take the names off of the actual resume, so that when the leader is evaluating, they are evaluating who they want to speak to based on what they're seeing in terms of the resume. Another thing that I've seen other organizations do, and some organizations have been doing this a while, is that they do not allow face-to-face interviews. They do phone calls, because they can't make up. It's almost like, The Voice or The Masked Singer, is that you're then talking to the person without having preconceived notions about what they look like or who they are, male or female. Now, of course, when you get them on the phone, you're going to make you're going to start to create distinction. And then the third thing is, as Cindy said, be willing, if you see something, say something, be willing to stand up and take that additional step to advocate or to align yourself, be an ally when you see a marginalized person or a marginalized group and help them get a leg up. This is when you're able to use your advantage. Now, the word that people are using is, and I don't even like the word that it just went out of my head, your privilege. But this is an advantage that you have. All of us in some way, shape, or form have an advantage one time or another. Our ability to use that advantage to help somebody who doesn't have that advantage is a form of advocacy and allyship. And, the last thing is, when you go back, what we're willing to do, if you'd like, is to have a conversation, a strategy discussion. Where should you start for your organization? Do you need to start with acknowledgement? Do you need to start with authenticity and being deeply honest? Do you need to start with advocacy and allyship? Do you have that and really just need to take action? So we are willing, if you'd like, to just have a conversation and to see where you are and to help you understand your next best step. We hope that some of the tips we shared with you today will help you And again, reach out to us at info@lcbgroup.com, and we're happy to just have a conversation on what the next steps that you can take are to bring diversity, equity, and inclusion to your organization. Thanks so much.
Thank you.